Hi, I'm Paul Lister, and welcome to Agile Keys, a podcast about Scrum, Agile, everything in between, and everything on the edges. So last week we looked at the Agile Manifesto, the 4 values that define the commonalities between different Agile frameworks. And this week we're going to look at one of those Agile frameworks, Scrum. What you're going to see is a video that I had to do when I was training to be a certified Scrum trainer. It's basically describing Scrum in 8 minutes. It's not going to explain everything about Scrum, but it's going to explain the foundations, the fundamentals, the important parts of Scrum. I reiterate this at the end of the video, but if you actually want to learn about Scrum, I would advise you to take a Certified Scrum Master course with the Scrum Alliance. But at the very least, what you should be doing is looking at the Scrum Guide. This is available at scrum.org. And as I say at the end of the video, I will put the link into the podcast notes. So what follows is Scrum in 8 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. This is Scrum in about 8 minutes, a short primer explaining the Scrum Framework. Sometimes stakeholders don't know what they want from a product until they actually use it. Which is why it's a good idea to build it in small parts, so that any changes that need to be made are also small and don't cost very much. Scrum is an Agile framework that helps teams to do this. What enables these changes to be made in Scrum is the use of empirical theory. This asks that work is undertaken in as visible a way as possible. This transparency means that it is easier to inspect the product as it is built, and hence any changes can be made that are required. In Scrum, this is the 3 pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. In order to mitigate risk, Scrum keeps things small. A small piece of the whole product, which is of value to the user, is built. This is called the increment. In order to get feedback quickly and mitigate the risk of change, the increment is built in a small period of time. This small period of time is called the sprint. And in order to avoid complication, it is built by a small number of people, called a Scrum team. Normally 10 people or fewer. Let's go back to the increment and see where it comes from. Scrum has artifacts, things that are built by the team, and commitments, a promise of what the artifacts are going to be. Let's look at each of these artifacts and their linked commitments. There is a long-term vision for what needs to be built, called the product goal, our first commitment. The team create a prioritised list of things to build in order to fulfil this goal. This is known as the product item backlog. When it is time to build the increment items, i.e. within the sprint, these items are selected from the product backlog. The sprint goal, another commitment which describes the increment, is written. Items are selected from the product backlog to create this increment. These, the sprint goal and a plan of how to do it, are known as the sprint backlog, another artifact. The built increment is an artifact itself, but it is not finished unless it has satisfied a set of criteria. This is the commitment known as the definition of done. Let's look at the events in the sprint that aid the building of the increment. Refinements are not an official Scrum event, but teams tend to have an extra meeting to write, understand the effort of, and break down product backlog items into smaller chunks. At the start of the sprint, the team meets to decide what the intended increment or increments are. The developers select items to be in the sprint backlog to achieve the sprint goal and create a plan in order to create these increments. This is sprint planning. The people in the team involved in the actual building of the increment, the developers, have a daily meeting, the Scrum, to discuss their progress toward the sprint goal. At the end of the sprint, the team and stakeholders examine completed increments and to discuss how they affect the long-term product goal. These will be fed into the next planning session. Before the next sprint, the team has a retrospective, often facilitated by the Scrum Master. They decide if they want to change how they want to work in the next sprint, understanding what they've learned from the previous sprint. Our last thing, and the most important, is the team itself. There is a product owner, developers, and a Scrum Master. These are called accountabilities in Scrum. In a Scrum team, members are responsible or accountable for different elements of the process. The product owner is accountable for understanding and communicating the value of the product, and hence the intended increments. Developers, which are the members of the team who make, test and deliver, are accountable for the creation of the increment. The Scrum Master is accountable for the effectiveness of the team. The easiest way to understand this is that the Scrum Master coaches the team in practice to mitigate risk, such as Lean, Scrum and other Agile ideas. Also, they try to find ways to remove impediments to the team's progress. There are a set of values that is assumed a Scrum team will have or adopt in order to make the framework operate well. We have already seen the commitments associated with Scrum artifacts, but generally the team has a commitment to each other as well as the ideas within Agile and Scrum. In the daily Scrum, the team discusses the logistics of how to complete the sprint goal. This focus on the increment is the primary goal of every team member. In order for the first pillar of Scrum theory, transparency, to work, team members need to be open to the rest of the team and others about the manner in which they are working. Respect is necessary to engender trust and openness in each other so that events like the retrospective can have open, honest conversations about team improvement. Other values like commitment and openness take bravery to undertake, but also Scrum encourages teams to do everything they can to create and deliver an increment. So they may need the courage to learn new skills to do so. Let's see how it all works together. Before a sprint, teams refine product backlog items according to the product goal. At the start of the sprint, the teams plan what they need to do to build a product increment in the sprint defined by them. Each day the team checks where they are with regards to that goal, making changes if need be. At the end, the team reviews the finished increment with relevant stakeholders and discuss the next steps, feeding into their next sprint planning session. Lastly, the Scrum Master works with the team to reflect on how they interact in the sprint and whether they want to change their working practices for the next sprint. And that was Scrum in sort of 8 minutes. If you want to know more about Scrum, read the Scrum Guide at scrum.org. Thank you. If you like this podcast, please show that by liking and subscribing to it. My social media details will also be on the podcast notes. I'm always happy to talk about agility. Remember to keep responding to changes, and I hope to talk to you soon.